King Rhoam isn't just a bad father, he is an outright abusive and neglectful one. This piece of Hylian filth hides behind his kingly responsibilities to dodge any and all blame for his actions towards Zelda, but the truth is, a lot of suffering he caused her was completely unjustified and unnecessary, only serving to make him feel better. This is not a theory, this is an exposé. First thing that comes to mind when hearing the word abuse is the one of physical kind. However, that is not what's happening here. What we are dealing with is emotional abuse and childhood emotional neglect, forms of mistreatment with impact just as serious as that of their physical counterparts. We can define emotional abuse as a pattern of cruel behavior that creates fear and control, while childhood emotional neglect is a consistent pattern of failing to meet emotional needs of a child. To simplify, abuse is what happens to someone, while neglect is something that fails to happen. But those two definitions are broad and not very helpful. So let's take a more in-depth look, starting with emotional neglect. Emotional neglect means treating a child's emotions as unimportant, invalid, or of lesser importance to something else. Neglectful parents either don't notice or don't value a child's emotions, thus teaching the child that their feelings don't matter or are somehow wrong. All of these fit our case like a glove. King was barely present in Zelda's life in general, never taught her how to process her feelings, nor allowed her to show emotions around him in the first place, as he took that as a sign of weakness. Zelda's needs were always secondary to the threat of Ganon's return. King also didn't know, or try to learn, anything about her feelings and struggles. He generally didn't listen to her, didn't give her space for vulnerability, and instead kept raising the pressure. She was never offered kindness or consolation. As for signs of emotional abuse, I have a whole checklist. It's a paraphrased version of one provided by Psychology Today. Let's walk through it. Controlling the child, how they spend time and with whom. King was scolding Zelda routinely over her choices regarding how she spends her free time. Threats to the child, their safety, property, or loved ones. While King did not threaten Zelda directly, he did keep reminding her that Ganon will kill everyone in Hyrule if he doesn't unlock her power in time. Isolating the child from other people, be it family or friends. King had it easier actually, as Zelda didn't have any family and friends to isolate her from, so he just kindly made sure it stayed that way. Extreme jealousy, accusations, and paranoia. Jealousy and paranoia don't apply. But the king did keep accusing Zelda of wasting time and not trying hard enough, so yeah. Delivering constant criticism. Zelda's attempts at meeting Rhoam's expectations were never enough for him, and so he criticized her for it, never noticing, let alone praising her efforts. Regular ridicule or teasing. Didn't happen. And now, not as much of a jerk as you could have been award goes to King Rhoam of Hyrule, bravo, bravo! Acceptance or care being made conditional on child's choices. That wasn't really the case, as Zelda didn't receive any acceptance and barely any care as a form of punishment for constant failing. Oh, excuse me, for Rhoam, it's apparently a teaching method, right? Demeaning, shaming, or humiliating the child. We know of at least one instance of public humiliation. Given how that scolding looked like, we can only assume that the other ones were similar in nature. Thwarting child's personal goals. King did everything in his power to stop Zelda from pursuing science, despite knowing full well she liked it and was good at it. Instilling sense of self-doubt and worthlessness. Zelda is seen feeling worthless and called a failure to her face by the king. Gaslighting, making someone question their competence and perception. Nope, Zelda was questioning her worth, but not really the competence or perception. But that's a lot of accusations and statements flying around. This sort of argument would not stand in court. So, is there any proof? Yes. Actually, there is plenty. King's behavior, along with the impact it had on Zelda, is well documented across the whole game, with multiple accounts detailing the events, especially regarding Zelda's psychological state. There is a lot of material to go through, so let us dive in. I find it interesting that the most detailed and damning account of the abuse came from the king himself. In the library in Hyrule Castle, there is a small room hidden behind a bookshelf. There, you can find King's journal. Rhoam started writing it on the day Zelda was born, and from it we can guess that the first few years of her life were pretty normal and happy. Things started taking a turn for the worse when the king realized the fortune teller's prophecy was starting to come true. In the second entry of the journal, we read, "Reports keep arriving regarding the excavation of relics. The fortune teller's predictions seem to be coming true. Calamity Ganon was not a figure of fable, or even a legend. He actually existed in our great land of Hyrule." That specific point marks the beginning of the cycle of abuse. King became terrified of Ganon's return, saw his own daughter as the solution to it, and started treating her as such. She became less a tiny human in his care and more a means to an end, a weapon. How do I know that the problem started right then? From the very next entry, of course, we read, "My queen has left this world. Her death was so sudden and unexpected. I awaken most nights, unsure if she is really gone." Zelda never cried, never faltered, not even during the royal funeral or later when she and I were alone with our grief. I must assume her strength is a result of us repeatedly informing her of her duty to be a valiant and steady princess. For a child of merely 6 years of age, her conduct was truly that of a born leader. Her strength gives me hope. Let me reiterate this for you. A 6-year-old child, a 6-year-old, did not cry after losing her mother, not during the funeral, not even when left alone with her only remaining family member. That is not normal. That is horrifying. That means at this point in time, again, at 6 years of age, Zelda already isn't feeling comfortable expressing her grief around her own father. I can't imagine how repeatedly informing her of her duty to be a valiant and steady princess must have looked like to produce these kinds of results. And what is King's reaction to that reality? He's happy. He doesn't worry about her. He doesn't encourage her to grieve in privacy or with him. He doesn't help her process a loss of a mother in any way. All he thinks about is that cursed prophecy and how hopeful it feels to have already successfully taught this poor girl that her feelings don't matter and should be bottled up or else. Urbosa, being a good friend of the late queen, was also present at the funeral. She didn't see later interaction, or lack thereof, between Zelda and Rhoam, but Zelda's behavior at the ceremony was enough for her to begin to worry. She carried herself as a true princess, but I can sense the deep grief she's hiding within. I worry for her. She's a foreign chief, and yet she shows more care and attention for Zelda by whole magnitudes than Zelda's own father. Let that sink in. Let's stick with Urbosa's account for a moment. Next entry comes from a year later. I made a voyage to visit Hyrule. After speaking with the king, I saw Zelda for the first time in a year. In truth, it was my concern for her that brought me there. The king allowed me to keep her company as she went to the spring for her training. There, Zelda prayed and prayed in the spring's icy waters until the sun set. I told her many times to stop, but she wouldn't listen. I eventually had to drag her out of the water. Zelda gazed at me for the longest time, with heartbreaking vulnerability. Eventually, in a tiny voice, she told me of the pressure and panic she feels at not being able to fulfill her sacred duty. She whispered, over and over, "Why can I not do as the royal daughters of the past have done? What is wrong with me?" All I could do was hold her close and listen. I prayed it is enough. Zelda's training was to begin at 7 years old. Her mother was supposed to be her teacher. After her sudden passing, there weren't any written documents or books detailing how such training should look like. It was all oral tradition in the female part of the royal line. In those circumstances, King's idea of the best way to train was sending her, a 7-year-old, to stand in cold water from sunrise to sunset, without breaks, accompanied only by guards. That formula for training never once changed in all 10 years of trying. King expected her to go, pray, and come back to him with results, like a good magic weapon she was supposed to be. Unfortunately for him and Zelda, he was dealing with a human instead. Urbosa actually accompanied her to her training at least once more. As she told Link,
"She's put in more than enough time. Ever since she was a young girl, she's gone through rigorous daily routines to show her dedication. She once passed out in the freezing waters trying to access this sealing power. And she has nothing to show for it."
Does that count as physical abuse? I think it does. Regardless, I'm going to hold it against the king because it's fucking abhorrent. Back to that quote from earlier though, because I am not done. According to Urbosa's account of the event, Zelda has been saddled with responsibility for survival of the entirety of Hyrule since age 7. She is already panicked and believes that something must be inherently wrong with her, a belief she carried with her for most of the game's story. Does the king notice or care in any way, shape or form? It has been a year and 3 months since her mother passed. Perhaps she's held back by heartache too deep to heal. I must act as a king, not a father. I must order her to train relentlessly at the fountain. Do you see what I'm talking about? This bastard, this absolute, utter piece of shit, is now blaming Zelda's grief, which he never helped her through, for her failings. He also is delusional enough to flat out admit he is treating her as his subject, not his daughter. Let's stop for a second here. King is the only living family Zelda has left. If he doesn't extend any warmth and care to her, then who is? From what we know, Urbosa, during her once-in-a-blue moon visits. That's it. Frankly, from a diary entry written by Zelda herself, we can infer that she never really had a chance to share her troubles with anyone. I wish to talk with him more and see what lies beneath those calm waters, to hear him speak freely and openly, and perhaps I too will be able to bare my soul to him and share the demons that have plagued me all these years. She doesn't state that directly, but reading between the lines, it seems that before Link, she never really had anyone with whom she could talk about how horrible she feels. No other documents or memories mention her having any trusted friends either. So she was alone with all of her fear and suffering. How very noble and humane of you, King! Speaking of Link, King chose him as Zelda's appointed knight, despite her strong dislike of him. Thankfully, it did work out well for her. However, it still shows just how little King cares about her feelings. While King did choose him because of Link's ability rather than malice, it was still very thoughtless of him. Meanwhile, best aunt Urbosa knew exactly what was happening, despite not being around Zelda all that much.
She gets frustrated every time she looks up and sees you carrying that sword on your back. It makes her feel like a failure when it comes to her own destiny. Don't worry, it's not like you carry blame in any of this. It's unfortunate. She's put in more than enough time.
I was told Zelda went off to research ancient technology, so I had no choice but to confront her about it. She claims she was simply using her day off from training to indulge in a bit of research, but I still scolded her. She won't get it through her head, forcing me to tell her the same thing I have been repeating ad nauseum. The reason her sacred powers still won't awaken is because she's spending all her efforts playing at being a scholar. Let me get this straight. Here, King not only shifts from pinning blame on Zelda's heartache to blaming Zelda directly, he also admits to telling her about it, scolding her for failing to meet his unreasonable expectations repeatedly, ad nauseum. He has no interest in how Zelda feels, nor why she does what she does. Only thing he cares about is putting her in her place. One incredibly telling detail is that the whole thing took place on Zelda's day off from training. She was literally allowed to do whatever the hell she pleased with that day, but King still rushed to drag her through the mud as soon as he heard about what she was doing. That's how much he hated her having any life of her own. What's worse is that King's account of the event is actually really fucking tame.
And should Ganon ever show itself again, we'll be well positioned to defend ourselves.
What are you doing out here, Zelda?
I was assessing the results of the experiment with the Guardians. These pieces of ancient technology could be quite useful against them.
I know that. They are essential to Hyrule's future, and our research demands that we keep a close eye on them. However, as the princess, you currently have a crucial unfulfilled responsibility to your kingdom. Let me ask you once more, when will you stop treating this as some sort of childish game?
I'm doing everything I can. I'll have you know that I just recently returned from the Spring of Courage, where I offered every ounce of my prayers to the goddess.
And now you are here wasting your time. You need to be dedicating every moment you have to your training. You must be single-minded in unlocking the power that will seal Calamity Ganon away.
I already am. Don't you see? There's nothing more I can do. My hope is that you'll allow me to contribute here in whatever way I can.
No more excuses, Zelda. Stop running away from your duty. As the king, I forbid you to have anything to do with these machines from this moment on, and command you to focus on your training. Do you know how the gossip mongers refer to you? They are out there at this moment, whispering amongst themselves that you are the heir to a throne of nothing. Nothing but failure. It is woven into your destiny that you prove them wrong. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand.
He literally publicly humiliated her in front of her only friend and few other guards. He refused to listen to anything she had to say and instead informed her that gossipers call her a failure. I'm sorry, but reminding her of her destiny after all this senseless trashing is not a sufficient consolation. In fact, by King's own admission, he never consoled her, not even once. Those in the castle talk behind her back, and I, her only family, scold her for her shortcomings. No wonder she wishes to hide away in her beloved relic research. I'd love nothing more than to console her, but I must stay strong. He stands with the gossipers against Zelda. He largely misunderstands why she's wanting to do research so badly, and he keeps stubbornly refusing her basic human contact and support. He doesn't deserve to be called Zelda's father. I have not seen my father since he last scolded me. Things are too strained now. I will meet him when I return. That interaction we saw in Link's memory was the last interaction these two ever had. In fact, this is the only unofficial interaction between them Link remembers. King's journal and Zelda's diary barely mention any other ones, so not only was King an abusive arsehole whenever he was around Zelda, he barely was around at all. Wow, just wow. Speaking of Zelda's research, calling what she was doing playing and hiding away isn't just unfair, it's delusional. Of course, it did serve as a coping mechanism, and everyone involved could see science has made her happier, including even someone like Daruk, who isn't particularly good at identifying complex emotions. All my Hylian brother seems to do these days is watch over the tiny princess while she does her research. It looks like tough work, but the princess seems a lot happier and talks more since she's been doing it, so it must be okay. However, it was so much more than that. In the first entry of her diary, Zelda writes, "The return of Ganon looms, a dark force taunting us from afar. I must learn all I can about the relics so we can stop him." Research isn't just something Zelda likes doing. It is one single avenue where she can actually make progress and for once feel like she's useful in preparations for the return of Ganon. She truly is dead set on helping to bring him down in any way she can. We see this in Link's memory, right after Calamity awakened.
Come, we should go. We need to get you someplace safe.
No. I'm not a child anymore. I may not be much use on the battlefield, but there must be something I can do to help.
We see this in Zelda's research notes. I can finally see the light of hope in our fight against the rising calamity. Still, we must exhaustively investigate all means of opposing the calamity. We must not give up no matter what. We even see this in Revali's diary, where Revali, despite having empathy of our Revali, notes, "I still remember that look on Princess's face. When she asked me to pilot the Divine Beast, she was not only determined, she seemed desperate. She's aware she can't fulfill her sacred duties, and anyone can see how it weighs on her." And how helpful Zelda was! From her research notes, we learn that she helped uncover and study the only known Sheikah slate. You know, that thing Link does everything with. It was Zelda, along with Pura and Robbie, who found out runes exist and researched Slate's ability to interface with guidance stones and shrine control panels. It was them who uncovered the Shrine of Resurrection and its functionality. It was them who helped champions learn how to pilot divine beasts. My point is, that team of three truly did a lot of heavy lifting, and without those efforts, the future we play through in the game might not have been possible. Speaking of the future, Link. Zelda's relationship with him is very telling as well regarding her state of mind. He's described as Urbosa, as being uncharacteristically cold towards Link, and it's not hard to understand why. By the time Link became Zelda's appointed knight, he already had the Master Sword. Zelda admits to assuming a lot about him. "I always believed him to be simply a gifted person who had never faced a day of hardship. What does the boy chosen by the sword that seals the darkness think of me? A daughter of Hyrule's royal family, yet unable to use sealing magic. He must despise me." And of course she thinks that. After all the abuse she has received, "people must hate me" became the default assumption, especially in the case of someone who was successful in fulfilling their destiny. This causes Zelda not only to be unpleasant towards Link, she also keeps avoiding him in any way she can. She doesn't want to see him or be seen by him, let alone speak to him. This in turn makes this happen.
Nothing. Just as I thought. It appears that this structure was designed to be exclusively accessed by the sword's chosen one. But designs can always be worked around. At least I hope. How do I get inside? I need to activate it somehow. I thought I made it clear that I'm not in need of an escort. It seems I'm the only one with a mind of my own. I, the person in question, am fine, regardless of the king's orders. Return to the castle and tell that to my father, please. and stop following me!
I believe this memory to be widely misunderstood. Zelda's behavior seems awful and irrational when viewed without context of everything we have just discussed. But when you take into account her state of mind, this couldn't have gone any other way. Yes, she was awful towards Link, but can we really blame her for preferring to look for a workaround way to enter a shrine rather than asking for help from the person she perceives as her enemy? Zelda needed a strong reality check to overcome her prejudice, and she got that when she escaped from Link's care once again. But we all know that part of the story. As we have discussed already in the previous section, Zelda also didn't really believe in her ability ever since she was 7 years old. She admitted it to Urbosa and later in life was seen asking gods about it in heartbreaking memory.
I come seeking help regarding this power that has been handed down over time. Prayer will awaken my power to seal Ganon away. Or so I've been told all my life. And yet, Grandmother heard them. The voices from the spirit realm. And Mother said her own power would develop within me. But I don't hear or feel anything. Father has told me time and time again. He always says, quit wasting your time playing at being a scholar. Curse you. I've spent every day of my life dedicated to praying. I've pleaded to the spirits tied to the ancient gods. And still the holy powers have proven deaf to my devotion. Please, just tell me. What is it? What's wrong with me?
She writes about her lack of confidence in herself in her diary as well. She even goes as far as calling herself cursed. My mother used to smile and tell me, Zelda, my love, all will be well in the end. You can do anything. But she was wrong. No matter how I try or how much time passes, the sealing power that is my birthright evades me. Tomorrow, I journey with Link to the Spring of Power to train, but this too will end in failure, such is my curse. She admits the same to Link in another memory, day before setting out for Lanayru Mountain.
I've prayed at the Spring of Courage, and at the Spring of Power, yet neither awoke anything inside me. But maybe up there. Perhaps the Spring of Wisdom, the final of the three, will be the one. To be honest, I have no real reason to think that will be the case. But there's always the chance that the next moment will change everything.
While she does hold desperate hope that something will finally happen after all these years, the rational side of her does not believe it will. On the other hand, what Zelda does believe is that no one would listen to her if she gave a warning. Actually, I've had a horrible feeling ever since that weird dream. No one would believe a failure of a princess, but right now, for no particular reason, I am filled with a strange and terrible certainty that something awful is about to happen. Which one has to wonder how many lives could have been saved if she wasn't mistreated so hard that she is now afraid of speaking openly about her feelings and powers. All this lack of self-confidence is a direct result of the king senselessly putting Zelda down and pressuring her to succeed all these years, which is why seeing her take all the blame for the events of Calamity off of the bastard and shouldering herself just breaks my heart.
It's all my fault. Our only hope for defeating Ganon is lost, all because I couldn't harness this cursed power. Everything I've done up until now, it was all for nothing. So I really am just a failure. All my friends, the entire kingdom, my father most of all. I tried and I failed them all. I left them all to die.
The short answer is no. In his journal, King is seen expressing that his heart breaks at Zelda's suffering, that he would love to console her but he can't as their situation is dire. This is all evasive BS. This will likely be her last chance. If she is unable to awaken her power at Lanayru, all hope is truly lost. If she comes back without success, then I shall speak kindly with her. Scolding is pointless now. Perhaps I should encourage her to keep researching her beloved relics. They may just lead her to answers I can't provide. His resolution to be kind for once after giving up is too little, too late. So is his sudden considering that maybe his preferred methods of training might have been wrong to begin with. King said Zelda should be single-minded in unlocking her powers. Problem is, that is literally impossible. She's a human, not a robot. Her having emotions and interests isn't wrong, it's natural and should be treated as such. If King truly believed Zelda's emotions would get in the way of unlocking the power, then his actions are completely counterproductive. In his lack of care and interest, he didn't even notice that he was the root cause of the problem to begin with. He never understood that Zelda wouldn't have trouble with her emotions if he just allowed her to express them and process them in safe environments. But if she did that, he wouldn't be seeing the strength that was making him feel hopeful. If King truly wanted to help, guide and support Zelda through her training, despite him completely not knowing what the hell they are doing, he would, for one, adjust difficulty level according to her age and actually be interested in more than just results. He would try looking for new, maybe more effective methods, instead of ordering her to do the same thing over and over until it works. He would wonder if maybe other magic users in Hyrule, like Mipha and Urbosa, don't know something that would help. But he didn't do any of that, instead leaving Zelda alone with the problem. He only started considering other options when it was already way too late. To me, it displays his escaping of his own responsibility and complete denial over issues of his own daughter. This idea of him evading responsibility is further reinforced by the fact that he started pushing it away and onto Zelda ever since he realized Calamity was coming. Yes, she was key to fending Ganon off, but she was still only a small child, while he was a grown fucking adult and the actual ruler. He should be the one taking responsibility for everything, instead of hiding behind the back of a little girl like a complete coward. Providing Zelda with care and nurture was his responsibility. Protecting Hyrule and everyone living within it was his responsibility. Finally, helping Zelda overcome her struggles and fulfill her destiny was his responsibility. As the person who came up with this stupid training program and forced it upon Zelda, blame for her failing lies with him. Blame for Hyrule's destruction and failure to stop Ganon lies with him. Blame for Zelda's mental condition and suffering is his. I can't deny that Rhoam is a tragic character. However, he also is unredeemable. Like if you agree, my friends, and see you in the next one.